Okay, hello, good morning everyone. I think we'll make a start. Thank you all for coming. So today's event, Foster, Discovering Open Practices for Early Career Researchers, has been jointly organised by library staff from LSE, which is where I'm from, my name's Natalia, King's and Queen Mary University of London. And the purpose of the event is to bring together researchers from across the three institutions to talk about open access, open practices, and to encourage the building of and adoption of openness into your research practices and future publishing activities. So it's great to see so many people here. So we really want to encourage you to ask questions, tweet using the hashtag FosterOpenScience, and we'll be kind of monitoring that, and hopefully we'll get an active back channel going on today. So please ask questions, wave your hands around, speak to our speakers, ask questions of them, agree, heartily disagree, and we want to kind of get your thoughts. This is an opportunity for you to kind of share your thoughts on open access. So we also receive funding from Foster for today's event. Foster stands for, I've got it written down, Facilitate Open Science Training for European Research. And the purpose of that project, it's an EU-funded project, is to support training for early career researchers in order to encourage the adoption of open access, particularly in the context of Horizon 2020 and the European Research Area, and thinking about how you may need to comply with your future funders' open access policies. So thank you to Foster for their support. The format of today's session is, this morning we've got 3 great keynote speakers here to kind of set the scene, talk about open access, and then we'll have a panel session at the end. So we'll have questions for all of our speakers at the end. Lunch at 12:30 next door, and then we've got 3 afternoon workshops on some of the topics that we'll cover this morning, and they'll be run by staff, library staff from across the 3 institutions. So it's a great opportunity to meet some of the people in your libraries who will be helping you to implement openness into your daily work in a tangible way. So I really encourage you to sign up to one of those workshops. Then we'll have some current early career researchers and students here to talk about why they support open access and what it means to them, with some questions. And finally, we'll be going to the pub. So we're going to the old Bank of England on the Strand from 4:30, although we don't have a budget for that, so you will need to buy your own drinks. But please come and chat and make some new contacts from across the 3 universities. Finally, we're going to be recording the session today, and Jeremy's going to be taking photos. It's not going to be a live stream, but it is going to go in the Foster portal after the event. So if you have any kind of thoughts about that or issues with the photos, just let me know and we can talk that through. And yes, all of the slides from today's event will also be shared in the Foster portal in the spirit of open access. So you'll be able to go and check out the slides after the event. And that's it from me. So now I'd like to introduce Robert Hall from King's College London for some opening remarks.
Thanks very much, Natalia. Welcome. My name's Robert Hall. I'm Director of Library Services and Employability here at King's College London. And it's my real pleasure to welcome you to this conference today, and particularly to welcome you to this rather wonderful space. This is part of the oldest bit of King's College London. This was built in the 1830s, and it's a site of a lot of research and academic activity that's taken place over the last couple of centuries. So I think it's particularly fitting that we're here in a very historic place, that research has been taking place, and you're talking about modern ways in which we can research and share our research findings with the wider community. It's great that we've got participants here from Queen Mary and from the LSE as well, and it's a real spirit of openness that we're working together and collaborating, and that really goes to the heart of open research and open practice. As Natalia was saying, you're going to be hearing from expert speakers. There's going to be practical workshops. We've got current researchers. We've got leading experts in the field who are already using open practices. So I really would encourage you to take the very most that you can get out of today. Particularly talking, maybe I would say this, but particularly talking to our library colleagues who are here, who can facilitate some of the work that you'll be doing and really help you with your open practices and open research. And again, really do take the opportunity to network amongst colleagues from within your own institution. And I know sometimes in very large research-intensive universities, we don't always come across all of the colleagues who are working in our own fields, never mind other fields. But particularly with the opportunity of having people from other universities here, then it's great to be able to work right across those fields and disciplines and other institutions. So I really enjoyed today. It's your day. Ask as many questions as you possibly can. Interrogate all of the people that are here. Disagree, argue, question, and then really look forward to going to the pub this evening. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Robert. For our first speaker is Joe McArthur, who's the Assistant Director for the Right to Research Coalition and the co-founder of the Open Access Button. And Joe is also a recent graduate of UCL.
This is a big moment where we see if this will switch smoothly. No. So while this happens, so thanks for inviting me. Hopefully, there we go. Cool. So I'm going to talk, wow, that was quite loud, generally about, try and set up the day and talk about how you as young researchers can take control of the publishing system that you're going to inherit very soon. Thanks for inviting me. Hopefully the thud of my heartbeat at the moment isn't coming up on the mic. I promise if it starts to show, I'm not about to beatbox, I'm not about to rap or anything like that, just a bit anxious. So, as mentioned, I'm here on behalf of the Right to Research Coalition. It's about 5 years old now, and we're an organisation built around the idea that the access to research and the ability to reuse it should be a student right. Over the past 5 years, we built an organisation that is about 77 organisations strong. That's graduate and undergraduate student organisations representing nearly 7 million students from all across the globe. And essentially the one thing we do is educate and advocate for open access. As mentioned, I'm Joe McArthur, and my story is way shorter than the coalition's. Really, I got into this about 14, 15 months ago. I was a researcher working for the pharmaceutical industry, and was really frustrated by the fact that without my university's subscription, I couldn't access the research I needed to do what was supposed to be the cutting edge of research. And that was kind of a wake-up call for me, that outside of our university's doors, often we really can't access the stuff that we should have. And then I met my now boss, who educated me about open access, and I kind of fell into this, and quite quickly my career path changed from sitting where you guys would have been to advocating for open access. So what am I going to talk about today? I'm going to talk very briefly about how the scholarly publishing system works, and quite candidly, and then go on to talk about open access, hopefully make sure that everyone's on the same page with what we're going to talk about today, and hopefully discover what open practices really are, right? And then I'm going to talk briefly about what students have done and what you guys can do to continue to make progress on this issue. So, without further ado, I think this is a feeling that most people are familiar with, that idea that, you've spent hours, searching Google Scholar and the internet for that one paper that will answer all your questions. And you think you found it, but suddenly you're asked to pay. And sometimes it's in the last minute, and it's a tragedy. Sometimes you can try and find it somewhere else. But I think that that idea of crushing the computer is something we're all pretty familiar with. I know it was pretty familiar for me. But as I mentioned, I'm pretty new to this in a lot of ways. And for me, before I kind of came into this area, I never asked what was going on and why I was being denied access to this. Right? I just kind of called it a fact of life, moved on, and tried to find information somewhere else. So I'm going to quickly go into what's going on behind the paywall, right? What's happening behind there that is meaning that, I'm being denied access to the research that I need. And I think it's best summed up by a kind of adaptation of something that a guy from the publishing industry once said, right? So as researchers, we spend years laboring in the lab trying to make the simplest things work. We spend ages just trying to figure out, understand what we should be doing and how to do it most effectively and what data we need. And then we spend just as long writing it up and obsessing over every sentence, right? In the name of getting it published, getting it out there and sharing that research with people so it can be built on and impact can be had. And a key point of that is getting it out there and getting it published, right? And the way that works is that essentially scientists, scholars, people doing research complete their work and they go, okay, let's get it out there. So they push it out to publishers for free. They gift it to them, right? It's one of I think one of the most amazing gifts that you can give is the power and the knowledge of what you've learned, right? And then very nicely, other scientists organized by the publisher go and peer review it for you. So they go, is this up to scratch? Is this, are you missing something? That kind of thing. And that process adds a level of validation to the work. And if it's good, then it comes back to the publisher, who very nicely bundles it up into a journal for you, and then bundles those journals into bundles of journals, and then sells it back to your library, who then pays a huge amount of money to get access to it again on your behalf so that you can use it again. And sometimes that's even your own work, right? And there's a kind of catch in the system, right? In any other place where you buy things, you get to make a choice, essentially, as to whether you buy this research. But often for academics, it's not a choice. You have to be able to read around. You have to be able to do these things. And so when all of this research is bundled and sold by just a few people, what it creates is a monopoly, where people don't have a choice, more or less. If you want to do effective work, you have to be able to read the work of your colleagues, right? So we get into a situation where prices can get very high very quickly. And if this is starting to sound a little bit crazy, a little bit outrageous, then I think that's probably fair. And the system exists because we all have to do this, right? It's not really a choice. So the reason that paywall is there primarily is cost, right? To get access to the information behind there, you have to buy the journal, or your university has to buy the journal. And that can get very expensive very, very quickly. Here are some averages from across a few disciplines. In the health sciences, $1,500 to get access for one institution for 1 year. In chemistry, that can be a lot higher. In physics, it can be higher again. And the kind of, on the very high end of things, you can be paying $40,000 per year to do this. And, if you were buying a couple of journals, that may be doable, but often you need thousands or hundreds, and the cost escalates very, very quickly. And that cost is only getting higher, right? Over the past 20 years, this graph essentially shows that expenditures on serials, which is, in layman's terms, the costs that are going to journals and stuff like that, has gone up 400%. That's way above inflation. That's way above the costs that are being incurred. And that's just over the past 20 or 30 years. And that has led to people like The Economist being able to say with fairly a lot of confidence, this is quite a strong thing for The Economist to say, that the publishing obscure academic journals is now a rare thing in the media industry. It's a license to print money, right? And there's a lot of reasons why academic journals are a rare thing in the media industry, which I'll touch on in a second. But, a license to print money, that's quite a bold statement. And just how much money? We're talking in the billions and, at least in the millions. And the operating margins and profits are just tremendously high. Like, good time to be a publisher. Anything from 5% to 37%, right? From the publishers we all know and love, Elsevier, Springer, Taylor and Francis will probably ring a bell to most of you, and they're making huge amounts of money off of your work, which you've gifted to them and often given ownership of, right? And to give you a kind of idea of just how much money those kind of individual journal costs add up to, here are some figures that were obtained through Freedom of Information Act. This is not easy information to get, right? Publishers kind of guard it very closely, because if everyone knew what everyone else was paying, then you may be able to compete. You may be able to say, why are they paying much less than us, right? So you can see, for example, my old university here, University College of London, pays well over £1 million per year just to Elsevier. That's just to one publisher. And for, let's find King's College, who pays about £650,000. LSE is paying 150. Is Queen Mary on here? Queen Mary is paying essentially £500,000. These costs are being paid again and again and again by every year by every institution which needs access, right? And so these are just the top 20 universities. Any institution which wants to be able to read this, and there's many, many more in the UK and all across the world, will need to do even more. So when that feeling of frustration, is kind of like in the moment, right? When you've been denied access to this, I don't know if maybe next time you hit one, you'll feel even more frustrated because you now know why that is there, and hopefully, you can get just as angry as I did when I started. Not only was I being denied access to this because it was just a matter of fact, it was just a law of nature, but it was because there's been a system almost designed to do this, and the publishing industry is strange in that it spends a lot of time keeping people out rather than publishing your work. And while you're feeling this feeling, remember that you're not alone. This is something that the Open Access button produces. It's a map of people being denied access all across the world. And we've got about 9,000 paywall hits now, which have been recorded. What's important to understand is that we made this in our bedroom. It's not meant to show a proper reflection of just the true scale, but it's an indication. It's at least an image which shows that there are people all across the world being denied access to this, and their stories are heartbreaking. This is a slide I made in the second day of the button being launched, and I haven't really gone back since because it shows most of what I think the button is there to show. There's academics in there who, joking around, I'm trying to cure cancer. There's students trying to do their homework. There's doctors trying to treat patients. There's patients trying to understand their own conditions, and way, way, way more. I should go back and update this, but it's amazing. And when you look at those stories, people, if I was that doctor, if I was that student, if I was that patient, I certainly wouldn't try and stop at that paywall. And so people try and go out of their way and out of the kind of legal system of doing this to try and access this research, and huge kind of underground, I've heard it called a black market for research before, has evolved to support this need, right? On Twitter, you'll find the hashtag #IcanHasPDF, which is fairly well known for people saying, I need access to this, can you email it to me? There's similar groups on Facebook. There's, and I think most of us in this room will have said, you emailed a colleague saying like, hey, I can't get your paper, can you email it to me? I know that's something I used to have to do quite a lot. But the important thing to realize here is that this is not a correct way of doing things, and it can have impacts. We're lucky, most of you probably have never been negatively impacted by this, but some people are being negatively impacted because they're forced to do this. This is someone I'm working with, Diego Gomez. He's 26-year-old. He lives in Colombia, and he studies biodiversity and conservation. He's doing his master's project on it at the moment. And to do that, he lives in Colombia. There's not exactly a lot of money wandering around in Colombia to buy these expensive journal subscriptions. So he had to travel to the nearest city, to the biggest library around, where he would get the research that he needed as well as he could, and then he put it online, but on our file sharing website for his colleagues to view when they couldn't go to the nearest city. That's quite expensive to do. He had to save money to go up and make these trips, right? And because of this is technically in Colombia infringing copyright, and he's now being sued and faces 4 to 8 years in prison because of this. Because of this act, which is just sharing scholarly research, is something we've all done, right? But it can have negative impacts on both a personal and a kind of academic level. So the question to ask is, that's the human cost of research. Sometimes people will be going to prison facing huge fines. You can't do your research properly. There's a human cost to putting a price tag on research. So it's important to ask, is there a reason for the system to be this expensive? Right? Does the need justify that price tag of $20, $30, $40 and it's fairly equivalent price in pounds? In 1914, if I was giving this presentation, which would have been impressive because PowerPoint didn't exist, I would have said yes, absolutely. To whenever someone wanted to read research, when you wanted it in your lab, when you wanted it, delivered to your home, that cost. Someone had to print that, had to often color print with extremely complex figures and send it to you, right? That all cost money. Every time you wanted to read it, it cost a serious amount of money to do that. And so this was the only viable model. But in 2014, we've got the internet, we've got computers which allow us to produce perfect copies of research and send them around the world at almost no cost. And while that doesn't mean that publishing is free, it does give us the opportunity to say, is there a better way of funding it? Is there a better way of doing this which allows for us to remove that price tag to the user and take up the cost of putting it online and hosting it there for free? In another way. And I think it's also worth recognizing that most of the system is publicly funded. Most of the wages of researchers and the money used to do this is publicly funded, about 80% on the global level, but that does vary depending on the field, depending on the country, but that's a general statistic which you can kind of use to guide you. And so this is publicly funded research, so we should, if in any possible way, have access to at low to no cost. So at this point, I think it's important to ask if our publishing system should distribute the knowledge that we work so hard to create. Should it share our values? Should it support us in doing this? Right? Science, scholarship, almost all research is about sharing and having impact. Right? And I said that scholarship and publishing journals is unique in the media industry, in that it's a license to print money. Well, it's also unique in that we have the opportunity to change that. Right? In that scholars don't publish because they need to make money to eat, right? They publish to have impact. Their wages are supported in other ways, and so they are potentially free to take up this opportunity that the internet provides, to provide all their content for free and realize the value, right? So, again, should it meet our needs? As researchers, we're spending a lot of time putting this stuff together. So let's get it out there. And I think most people in this room will probably be able to identify that it's becoming almost impossible to keep up with the research in your field. It's just not possible. There's too many papers from too many people in too many places, and pulling out the important bits of information is becoming increasingly difficult. And as much as I think we'd all like to sometimes, you can't spend all day reading. So we need to think of new ways to use this literature, not just to read it, but to use it. Right? And we need to start being able to bring computers in to do some of the work for us. And the only way to do that is through what I'm going to talk about right now, which is open access. Open access being the free and immediate online access to scientific and scholarly articles with full reuse rights. The full reuse rights being really important to help us not just read, but use research, to make it machine readable, to be able to do all these really, be able to use figures in our research and stuff like that. It's a key point. And open access to research is not changing the vast majority of the system of publishing, it's just changing where people pay, right? So open access publication isn't low quality publication, it's not publication without peer review. Most of those key points stay the same, it's just about changing where people pay. And it's important to recognize that now, I think for years we've been talking about open access as this niche thing, as this thing which needs to become recognized. It's getting there. It's all, most people would say that we've moved from a point where we need to say that, if open access is going to become a reality, and moving into when and how it will become the reality, right? There's over 9,000 journals and 2,000 repositories which support open access to research now, and I think depending on the field, again, you're talking about 30 to 50% of publications being published open access. And really, I'll talk about the how of open access in a second, but it's already having an impact. It's not just, words on slides at the moment. Open access to research is allowing young people like Jack Andraker, who's a 16-year-old who managed to invent a novel test for pancreatic cancer after he got interested. His uncle died of pancreatic cancer, and this sent him down this path of looking for ways to diagnose the disease early, right? And he's now been able to invent a test which will do that. And if you're ever wondering what that looks like, it looks like that. His test was 168 times faster, 225,000 times cheaper, 400 times more sensitive, 100 times more selective than the current test, which was an ELISA. His test takes 5 minutes, it's 99% accurate, and it costs 3 cents, right? And the only way he was able to do this, and he's now come out as quite a big open access advocate, is because he was able to access things online for free, right? There aren't very many schools, for 15 and 16-year-olds who will buy you access to scholarly research, right? So he had no choice but to pay occasionally, but use mainly free online articles. And he says, his research is a testament to that, and we should make a move to more expensive, less expensive, or free online research, right? And I guess my point from all of this is that we need more Jack Andrakers, right? We need to be able to shift the system to become more open. And now I'm going to talk briefly about how students are making that change, are setting the default to open in how they publish and how they educate and advocate others around them. Students are almost the natural group to do this. Students and early career researchers have grown up in the system of the internet. We're used to be able to share things for free all the time, right? So in how they publish, I'll just briefly talk about how kind of open access publishing works at the top level. You'll talk more about this later, but there are generally 2 paths to open access. There's open access journals, for example, PLOS and the Open Library of the Humanities, but there's also a significant path is self-archiving. I think one that most of us will be familiar with is PubMed Central, which is a great example of this, right? So publishing an open access journal is becoming increasingly easy. There's now low-cost or free ways to do it, and there's over 9,000, approaching 10,000 journals which will help you do it. And most of them there's now an open access journal that is prestigious and has been in every field, and that's been true for about 10 years now, and is only becoming truer as the journals age. It's often possible to publish for free. That's 70% of open access journals allow you to publish for free. Or you can pay the article processing fee or charge, which can vary from anything from a few dollars per month to several thousand, depending on which journal you choose, right? But if you have to publish in a total access journal, that isn't the end, right? That's not game over. You can publish almost anywhere and deposit into an open access repository. For example, PubMed Central was the example I used, and as I said, now almost 2,000 of those. I think almost all institutions in the UK will have an institutional repository which you can publish into, which you can deposit into, or there's disciplinary repositories. And here's just a few numbers on that. You can now, with 70% of publishers, do some form of self-archiving, which just allows you to put a copy of your research into a repository somewhere so it can be accessed for free, even though your the article on the publisher's site may be behind a paywall. And this is a significant important part to open access. So how have students been supporting this aside from publishing? They've been educating and advocating, and that's something that our organization has helped support them to do. So I'll just run through a couple of my favorite examples. In the US, two of our members did over 1,000 congressional lobbying visits to Congress over the past four and a half, 5 years, right? And that's probably led to a huge impact on the public policy aspect in the US, which is now really positive. Similarly, these 2 organizations, as a part of that previous slide, got high-level pieces in things like the Washington Post around key times in the policy process. That's a terrible way of saying it, but we'll stick with it. Further, like in places like Kenya, some of our partners have worked to educate half of medical students in the course of a week, and that's kind of an astounding number of medical students who are educated on open access in just a week. Back home, students in the UK have convinced scholarly societies like the BMA to support open access, and that's now, the BMA has now launched a journal for an open access journal. You can do the kind of thing I did, which was set up a project with my friend in our bedroom, which is now helping to support people get access to research and also show that they're being denied access to research all across the world, right? And I think the student aspect of this, as I said, like you guys are almost the natural people to advocate for this. We've grown up with this. And I think this quote sums up that quite well, that student initiative often gives a whole new impetus to the discussion around open access, right? You guys are in the position you're going to inherit this publication system, and you should really take ownership of it to a certain extent. And I think John here, and I could have chosen many people to give a quote very similar to this, your voice provides a whole new impetus when you're talking about this. So that's what others have done. What can you guys do in the next like 4 or 5 minutes? I think the first part of things is get educated. You can do that almost anywhere. We've got conferences which will be live streamed, and there'll be events in London this November that you can get involved in and start to learn more about the topic in way more depth than I can give you in half an hour. Just head to opencon2014.org, and there's a whole program in conference and webcasts and satellite events in the UK, which you can get involved with. There's times coming up this October, 20th Open Access Week, which is this year themed on our generation, Generation Open, right? Which is that week will celebrate the impact that students have had on the movement, but also try and address the challenges that they still face and some of the unique challenges that you guys face and we'll be talking about today, no doubt. But I think the most important thing that you can do, and this is summed up quite well by Erin, is to try and publish open access in however you can. So Erin here has taken a very strong pledge to only publish open access, and if that costs her career, then it's not one that she wants. She believes that science and scholarship is about sharing, about essentially making sure that your research is available to everyone, and she believes that so strongly she's willing to risk her career. But in a lot of ways, you don't need to. Most of the data that is coming back on the impact of publishing open access on careers is very, very positive. Like, you get more downloads, more views, and in some fields you'll get more citations, although there's data here and there that would go back and forth on that. So I think that's the most important thing you can do, and so that's why it's brilliant that you're here today learning about exactly how to do it. So I'll end with what else you can do. I need a hand, basically. I'm testing a new app, so I'll be around at lunch, kind of in a corner somewhere with a phone, like waving at people, being like, hey, what do you think of this? We're building an app to basically support young people, early career researchers in publishing open access, in talking about open access, and in also getting access to research on mobile devices as well as on the web, which is a significant part of the other work that we do with the open access button. So it's kind of exciting. You'll be like essentially the first people to see this thing up and running, and it's kind of very undesigned form, but would love to get some feedback from you. After today, if you don't feel like doing that, just talk about open access. That's the very simplest thing you can do. Or using the open access button in your kind of daily life. It's very simple and it's useful, and it helps add to the movement in a way where you don't even need to really do that much. Hopefully the other slides I've showed about what other students have been doing will give you other ideas if you want to go like much, much further. So that's basically the end. But my final point is that while this talk is over, the work is not. Lack of access affects not only us, it affects not only one country, one continent, or one field of study, right? And we are the generation to change that. We're the first ones to really grow into this system, and we won't be able to do this without the help of people like you. So thanks for listening, and if you want to recap anything I've said, head to that URL, and there'll be lots of stuff for you to kind of look at, peruse. If what I said made no sense, then there's videos which will do it much better than me. But if not, that's the end, and thanks very much.